Hey there, Liz. How are you doing? Good to catch up.
I'm very well, thanks, Emma.
We've got some, breaking news pretty much. Talking to Liz on our normal 9 o'clock morning, 9 a.m. morning meeting for the union, and I was pretty shocked, to be fair, when I heard what Liz had come up with and the mechanisms that she's discovered. So all around the Epidemic Preparedness Act and where that could take us in the very near future. I won't talk much further. I'll let Liz explain, and I'll screen share the legislation. So, and I know there'll be people out there that go, oh my goodness, you're going to be talking legislation. I don't want to know, but this is super, super important for everybody to really, really understand the gravity of where this could go. So persist in watching this, and share it everywhere you possibly can with everybody that you could possibly influence to watch it, because it's super important. And I'll hand over to Liz. And
Well, thank you, Emma. Yes, it was a weekend of thought I had around what is going on with the smaller parties. People could say the freedom parties, because we have been in a form of slavery for the past 3 years, with lockdowns, etc., etc. And there's been a lot of cases, really a sort of protest cases, if you like, but they haven't really, apart from in the Employment Authority and the Employment Court, we haven't got a grip on it, right? But what I want to talk about was what Emma said before. This is an act called the Epidemic Preparedness Act 2006. This act was the act that triggered and then kept in place the orders.
And
it was also the occasion for the making of the 2020 COVID-19 Public Health Response Act 2020. Yeah. This is an act that will make you shiver. It's a short act, but basically what it says is, if there's an epidemic, and it doesn't have to be in New Zealand, the Prime Minister has the power to do all of the things that she did. Right? And of course, that act is still sitting on our books. Very, very scary. Because Chris Hipkins is very cock-a-hoop about they're going to get back into power. They are not worried at all. They're not saying we'll do this and trying to make amends, if you like, and say, oh, well, we won't do it again, or we'll have to find a way that we can keep our industry going, etc., even if this does happen. And then combined with the fact that it could be that he thinks the opposition is weak, the opposition across all the parties, or he could think something else, and this is what we're going to talk about. What can happen? So we're going to have a look at sections 5 and 6 of the Act, and I think that it really puts it in a nutshell. Okay. Thanks, Em. I'll just get that back on my screen. Where have we gone? Okay. So the Prime Minister may enable use of special powers. This sounds like magic, doesn't it? With the agreement of the Minister of Health, the Prime Minister may, and remember who was the Minister of Health before? I think that might have been that other freedom sort. I can't remember who it was anyway. Oh, that's right. He got the one who went riding, and then he got put back, and then did Hipkins take it over anyway? But what may, by notice, declare that he or she is satisfied that the effects of an outbreak of a stated quarantinable disease within the meaning of the Health Act 1956 are likely to disrupt or continue to disrupt essential government and business activity in New Zealand or stated parts of New Zealand significantly. Right. Now, the Health Act 1956 is the act. It should be called the Public Health Act 1956 because that was the one we should have been using. But in actual fact, that protects us far too much. So that's in one of the schedules, the quarantinable diseases, right? Subsection 1 applies whether the outbreak is occurring within New Zealand or overseas. So there we are. There's the open door for the WHO, right? And the World Health Organization, the UN, or any other creepy outfit that thinks it wants to tell us what to do. Subsection 2. If not renewed under Section 7, under Section 7.1, the notice expires on the earliest of the following. Now they're talking about a notice that you can issue under this act that allows the orders to continue. Okay, because those you could have the act, but the orders had to be kept in place by continuing every 3 months, renewing Section 7.1. And that's how it was kept in place. Okay. The Prime Minister must not give notice except after considering the written recommendation of the Director General of Health, who was Bloomfield. Now, Bloomfield is not an elected representative. This is entirely the Crown. Okay. The Prime Minister is acting as the Crown, not as a representative of the people of New Zealand, but as the Crown is running this whole show. While the notice is in force, further notices may be given, modifying its effect. So remember, there was all those modifications that they made. Every time we got a little traction, they'd modify it. Remember how they cut out Section 7A to stop people going to the doctor and getting exemptions?
Yeah.
Okay, in the case of an epidemic notice that applies to only stated parts of New Zealand, and remember all of those notices were all of New Zealand, so this doesn't apply. Okay. A notice under this section is secondary legislation. See, so it never had to go near the Parliament. See Part 3 of the Legislation Act, and this is where we look at the Gazette and we find out, it's all in there. So each of these ones was gazetted. So let's have a look at Section 6.
Can I just stop you for a minute here, Liz? So
sure, go.
With secondary legislation and how that comes to be, can you just explain a little bit around?
Yeah, sure. So we've got what's called primary legislation, which are acts of Parliament. And then we've got secondary legislation, which are regulations and orders made under those acts. The first part, acts of Parliament, are pretty rarely made in New Zealand. They're not made all that often these days, but there is a lot of regulations made under existing acts. It could even be that, and I've got to check it out, but I think that the changes to the guns law were made as regulations. I don't think they were made as acts of Parliament somehow.
Yeah, no, I think there was a little bit made under the Firearms Act, but yeah. But
if it's made under the Firearms Act, it's a regulation, so it doesn't have to be debated in Parliament.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the key there is the fact that secondary legislation, bills and orders and regulations are much easier for them to push through than...
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, because we knew Parliament wasn't operating, but we had all of this stuff going on with lockdown orders and God knows what, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now this is really, really important for us now, Section 6. Parliament has been dissolved. It was dissolved on the 4th, I think. No, that's today. It was dissolved last week sometime.
Yeah.
Right? And it won't be back again until there's been an election, and then the writs are issued, and those writs are taken up by elected members of Parliament, and they're sworn in. Right. So what happens, though, in this situation we've got now? This subsection applies to an epidemic notice if it is given, when it is given, and Parliament has been prorogued until a day more than 7 days after the date the notice is given, or Parliament has been prorogued and the date on which it is next to meet has not been determined, or C, Parliament has been dissolved or has expired and no proclamation has been made summoning it to meet on a day not more than 7 days after the day on which the notice is given. So that means if there was suddenly, we got from the WHO that there's something terrible had broken out in Wuhan or God knows where, they issue a preparedness notice, they issue a notice under this, right? They can lock everything down again. They can immediately go back to the 2020 Act, right?
Wow.
Because we are the election is not going to be until the 14th of October. It could be that, after they take 6 weeks and everything there's all sorts of this mucking around they do. You never find out on the day. It could be, November, December even, before we got Parliament back operating again. In that case, Parliament has to meet, right? And it can then do exactly what it wants. Basically, it could stop that election occurring.
Yeah, and
it can just sit there.
On. Yeah,
it can sit there for another 2 years or 3 years, doing what it wants.
Yeah,
issuing orders under the 2020 Act, because you can't because 2020 Act's still there. You can't you could get Parliament together again, but it'd be the same people. You can't, because it's dissolved and they're supposed to be without a job. But in the case like this, they could be called back to Parliament again and do the same thing over again. And that's what I believe Hipkins is cock-a-hoop about.
Yeah,
I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think that they have any fear, because they are going to pull it back in again.
Yeah.
And if people and of course they have the power to call on martial law if people didn't like it.
We already have evidence through the various groups that they're talking about another virus and masking and that in the US. They're already talking about it. So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. We've already heard the rumours. So it's best if we take this very seriously.
Yeah.
Whilst not being fearful.
Yeah.
We've just got to get in there and get the information out there. So Liz, what's the next part of this?
What do you do about it? Because I never like to be alarmist or anything, or sound the alarm without a plan about what to do about it. Right. Knowledge is power. Once people know this, and this could happen, and they start talking about it, I think it's unlikely to happen, right? Because it would be too risky for them. However, it is a great opportunity for parties who want to resist this ever happening again, to get together and to promise before the election occurs that they will all vote to repeal this act. They will all vote to repeal the 2020 Act. They will all vote to repeal the Treaty of Waitangi Act, 1975, and to repeal the Resource Management Act, 1991. Now, you might think, well, what has that got to do with it, right? What we're trying to do is we have different ideas about everything else, but we just want to we just want to stop this. Well, that's not good enough, really, is it? Because they're doing stuff in our country already, like this co-governance stuff and the drumming up social Marxism on the back of racism, so-called racism.
Yeah.
And they are also wanting to put in the 15-minute cities with the climate change rubbish. But the mechanism for doing the climate change, of course, is the Resource Management Act. That needs repealing. That is a very popular thing to be repealed. The farmers want it repealed. Big sections of people who don't identify with the small freedom parties want it repealed. Act and actors come out against the Treaty of Waitangi Act, right? Wants that repealed, wants us all together without racism from here on in, and I agree.
Yeah.
We want to have sweeteners for the big parties and the small parties to combine on this, right?
Yeah.
And that should stop, for a start, it should stop the small parties from snipping at each other. They should be all agreeing that they're going to divide up the electorates with the best people for the electorate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Which is how it should be, eh?
Yeah, don't poach each other's stuff, guys. You can run even if you're still in opposition, as long as you get through the door, you can do things because you've got to vote then. Your vote as a member of let's say New Zealand Loyal or Freedom and Rights Party or whatever, your vote in Parliament is just as valuable as a vote from National, ACT, Labour, Greens, whoever else is in there, right?
Despite the propaganda that's going around.
Despite the propaganda. It's the same sort of thing, people, and I always think to myself at election time, people say, oh yeah, but you've got somebody who's lady muck or he's head of a big corporation and he's voting such and such. His vote is the same as your vote. In terms of numbers, it's the same. And in terms of block voting in Parliament, using members' bills, this can be repealed. These 4 acts can be repealed. The first 2 are deadly important to get that 2006 Act repealed straight away. Yeah. It is the most draconian handover of power to the Prime Minister that I've ever seen. I mean, I was looking at it I was always curious about how they had triggered it all, and I could see it was pretty devious. But when you read Section 6 and you realise, they could stop an election happening by using reigniting it all again by using this act, right?
And
so, this is real important, guys, because I mean, I know everybody's very, very busy and everything, but you might not have an election to be busy for.
Yes, exactly.
Unless you can get you together.
Yeah.
and fight back and do it strategically, right? Because you join in a determination to stop this with all parties who will agree to do this. You don't have to like them. You don't have to like anything they say, but you need an agreement to repeal these acts.
Because this will absolutely crush New Zealand. If this happens, this will be, most businesses will be gone. Most little businesses will be gone. It won't end well. So
they can bring in the police or the military to enforce it. I don't believe they can do it again in the businesses, right? I don't believe that. I think we've got workers protected now, because we know that they can't use a public health act in a workplace. Right.
But they'll use it to close the borders, close trade, stop people going out, close businesses, because of this terrible pandemic that's arrived again. So I think, and I'm not someone who was particularly worried last time, but I think it's just ruined so many people's livelihoods and lives, and we need to do everything.
And of course, we've got people brainwashed into thinking jabbing is going to do something. If there is something really bad out there that people are actually dying of, it'll be obvious pretty darn quickly, okay? And that is what medical scientists are supposed to be investigating, the illness in the person, right? They're not supposed to be looking at vaccines. They're supposed to be in a pandemic. They're supposed to be finding out they went with testing, but of course we knew the testing was rubbish. But nobody was actually falling ill with symptoms, right? So they could say anybody's got it. They had a whole lot of testing doing, and that gave the impression that there was a whole lot of illness. There wasn't. There was very little illness. The hospitals were empty before the jabs came along.
They sure were. And the injury.
And they were lying about it. They were absolutely lying about it. But you couldn't find out what was in the hospitals, of course, because they were all locked down. Right? Very tricky. Very, very tricky. We've got a Health Act 1956. If there is something bad that happens, it's got all the necessary pieces of all the necessary mechanisms to sort everything. There's no need to be afraid of this. But what you need to be afraid of in this case is this law being used as a weapon against you. And that's what it was designed to do.
Against the country, to shut down the country, and that's and bring in the kind of government control that we don't want, similar to China, but more than likely.
Well, you know that Helen Clark, of course, 2006, I think that her regime ended in 2008. 2008, the national government came, and she went to the UN and became the secretary for the sustainable development, which is basically another name for the New World Order plan for 15-minute cities, climate change. But of course, she's a Maoist. She's a communist. And she takes her lead from China. And the way they work with their people. So that's we won't talk too much around this, because I think people need to be focused. They need to read that act. It's only a few pages. I think it's only about 2-3 pages long. It's very short. It was short, sharp, and to the point, like a bullet to the brain.
and you know, the thing with getting to grips with this stuff is to tell people about it, because while you're speaking it, you're confirming it in your own mind and your own understanding, and you'll get clearer and clearer about what it is and what it could do. That's, you know, don't be afraid to get it a bit wrong. If you've got the general sentiment and you get the general concept, then you'll be, share away. Need to get it out there ASAP. You've got good sized messenger groups or followers on Rumble or anywhere, just get it out there and share it so it gets out to as many New Zealanders, caring New Zealanders as possible. Yeah. And if you've got any questions, reach out.
And I'd also encourage you to, if you know the leaders of the parties that you want to vote for, get it to them. Say, listen, this is the danger.
Yeah.
Get together with everybody else, every other party.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust the Greens. I wouldn't trust Labor. They're not going to.
No.
Aboard. Maori Party is not going to come aboard, especially with the intention to, because I think that, we're still in a lot of internal danger with the Treaty of Waitangi Act still there, and with the Resource Management Act still there. And it's a chance for people to get together as New Zealanders and say, put aside their
cultural differences,
their differences, and be patriots, right?
Yeah, because we can sort the smaller disagreements out later.
You don't have to join. Nobody has to join umbrella parties or make deals about we're going to vote with you on everything that you want to put forward, etc. Just these 4 acts need repealing.
Yeah, and that pretty much stops any of the who's or the WEF stuff that they want to do. Yeah. No, it's super important. No, that's awesome, Liz. I think that's pretty much covered it off. And we're definitely going to be sharing it flat out. So definitely appreciate everybody else jumping in there as much as they can.
Thanks for that, Emma.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Liz. That's awesome.
Better get back to the other work now.
Yep, we'll catch you later. Yeah, exactly. Nose to the grindstone again. Very good. Love your work, Liz. Thanks heaps.
Oh, love yours, Emma. Okay, guys. Guys, I'm already, I'm used to talking to a whole lot of people, aren't I? But just you and me today.
It will be.
But hopefully we're talking to a lot of other people eventually.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks
heaps. See you later. Bye.
Bye.